Unlike major scales where there's only one version, with minor scales we actually use a few variations. And in a piece of music in a minor key, it's actually common for them to switch between which one they're using depending on which sound they're going for at that moment. The three main variations are called the natural minor, the harmonic minor, and the melodic minor, but there's actually one more that I like to include, which I know is technically called a mode, not a scale, and that's Dorian. People often leave this one off the list, but it actually gets used a lot in contemporary music, and you'll see as the video goes on why I think it makes sense to include it. This is part 3 in my minor scales series. In the first part, we looked at how to build and how to find the natural minor. In part 2, we looked at how that fits into a major scale, how to find the relative minor key. So in this video, I'm going to explain what these common variations are, how to understand them, a little bit about why we use them, which is important, and towards the end, how to find them easily in any key. Understanding them properly and being able to recognize them on the keyboard will help you play them, use them in music, hear them when you're working things out by ear, and also recognize them when you're reading too. And I've also got a worksheet available from my website covering all this minor scale theory, a recap of everything in these 3 videos. The simplest way to learn this is just to get used to the slight variations in the pattern of these scales, and we can describe that clearly by what intervals are used to make them. It's actually only a couple of notes at the top that we keep changing. Let's start with the natural minor, which we've been using in parts 1 and 2, and in C minor, which is the clearest key to learn anything in when you're trying to visualize what intervals it's made of. So we learned already that these are the intervals that build a natural minor scale. So it's easier to visualize which intervals are which in this key because all the minor ones are black. The first 5 notes in all of these variations are going to stay exactly the same. We've got root, major second, minor third, fourth, fifth. Remember, the best way to describe things like scales and chords is just to know what intervals they're made of. You have to understand the labeling system for intervals, and I have a video explaining that fully if you need. If this G here was the 5th note of the scale we just got to, from this point, the remaining interval options we can use are the minor 6th, the major 6th, the minor 7th, or the major 7th. Then we're just back at the octave or the root again. So if we're only going to use one of the 6s and one of the 7s, which we are, that gives us 4 possible combinations. Both majors, both minors, minor major, or major minor. This is one of the reasons I like to include Dorian, because it seems silly just to leave out the final combination. As you go through learning minor scales in different keys, I suggest learning the natural minor as your starting point, like how I've talked about in the previous videos, and then use these small adjustments I'm about to show you to create the other variations. So the next one is harmonic minor. The harmonic minor has the flat or minor 6th and the major 7th. The problem sometimes with the natural minor is the 7th note in the scale. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1. It doesn't quite have the same pull back to the home note, the same sense of tension and resolution as, say, a major scale. This part here really sounds like it's taking us home. We call that note that's a half step below the root. Obviously it's a major 7th, but we call it the leading tone as well because it leads us home. Basically, sometimes we want that musical effect, that pull home, in a minor scale. So we change this 7 for the major 7th and call this new scale, this new selection of intervals, the harmonic minor. It has a very distinct sound you can play with, especially this top part. As I said, music of all styles in a minor key will quite often fluctuate between the types of minor scales mid-song depending on what sound they're going for at that particular moment. When you want that sound or that pull home, you can use the harmonic minor. So harmonic minor gave us that pull, but it also has that really distinct sound. Sometimes it may be a bit much and we don't always want it, so that's when we can use something called the melodic minor. Keeping the 7 on that major to give us the pull. We're now also going to put the 6 up to major. Now we have both a major 6th and a major 7th. The cool thing about this is that now the top part is just like a major scale. Of course, we still have the minor 3rd down here though. This scale is exactly like a major scale, but with a minor 3rd or a flat 3. Remember, the minor 3rd is the most significant defining feature of a minor scale. Now, in the classical world, melodic minor is often taught as ascending the way I just showed you, but then descending back down through the natural minor pattern with the flat 6 and flat 7. The idea is that you don't need that pulling sound on the way down, but in reality, a lot of music, particularly more modern music, doesn't always stick to that. It just uses the sound that that scale has. And in the jazz world and more modern context, people just mean the ascending pattern when they say melodic minor. I'm telling you just so you know it's a thing that exists, but here I'm just focusing on what it is and not so much how it can be used. Those are the three main minor scales that you'll usually only hear in this context. But like I said at the start, I like to include this next one, Dorian. Particularly if you want to play any more modern music, jazz or things like soul and funk and blues, you'll need to know Dorian. And in those worlds, it seems to come up a lot more in my experience than melodic. So Dorian is technically called a mode, not a scale, which yes, they do have different uses in some context, and you can distinguish them, but some of us like to use a scale in a bit more of a broader sense as being a group of notes or sounds and intervals that you can use to create music with. And in that case, they're effectively the same thing. But I'm going to save that topic to get into properly in another video. So we've been using different combinations of the 6th and 7th notes of the scale. Dorian is the final combination. As ever, keep those first 5 notes in the scale exactly the same. Dorian uses the major 6th and the flat 7th. We no longer have that pulling sound from the major 7th, but overall we just have something else, a new kind of sound to make music with. As I said, this is used a lot in funk and blues and soul and things. So to quickly sum up those different types of minor scales, they all use the same first 5 notes. The natural minor uses both minors, 6 and 7. The harmonic minor uses the minor 6th and the major 7th. The melodic uses the major 6th and the major 7th. And the last one is Dorian, which uses the major 6th and the flat 7th. When you try and find these scales in other keys, the shapes are always going to change, so it can be a bit visually confusing. Sometimes the different 6s and 7s will be black, sometimes they'll be white. So what I suggest you do is, once you've learnt the natural minor, keep the 5th note of that scale as a strong marker in your mind. And from there, practice going up in order, minor 6, major 6, minor 7, major 7. And when you're comfortable seeing where those notes are, it's going to be much easier to play these scales. So in the key of A minor, we already learnt in the other videos that this is all the white notes as it's relative to the key of C major. So if we look at the first 5 notes, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, they're going to stay the same. So if this is the 5th note of A minor, a half step on is the minor 6th, then the major 6th, then the minor 7th, then the major 7th, then back to the octave. So the tricky thing is that the shapes change. In the key of C major, the minor 6 and 7 were black and the major 6 and 7 were white. But now in the key of A minor, the minor 6 and 7 are white and the major 6 and 7 are black. And that's going to keep varying in all the keys. If we want harmonic, we're going to put that 7th note up, making G, G sharp. If we want melodic, we're going to put the 6th up as well. So F and G become F and G sharp. And I named those notes F sharp and G sharp on purpose. They could also be called G flat and A flat, but when we're spelling notes of the scale, we want to have one of each letter in order. That way the 6th note of the scale is always the 6th letter in the sequence. And if we want Dorian, we're going to use that major 6th, F sharp, and then the flat 7, G natural. Here's the 6s and 7s in D, where you can see the shapes look different on the keyboard yet again, even though the intervals remain the same. To get confident learning and easily memorizing new scales in every key, really pay attention to being able to see those 6s and 7s. So we already learnt D natural minor in one of the other videos. These are the first 5 notes. So if A is the 5th of D, we've got B flat as the minor 6th or the flat 6th. We've got B natural as the major 6th, C as the flat 7th, or C sharp as the major 7th. So the 6 is always B because it's the 6th letter in the sequence, and the 7th is always the letter C because it's the 7th letter in the sequence, and the 7th note in the scale. If we were playing a piece of music in the key of C minor, for example, we'd have the key signature of C minor at the beginning. That means we don't have to keep putting flats in for every note. So we'd have E flat, A flat, and B flat. we don't have to keep drawing the symbol in because they're in the key signature. But if we want to use one of the other kinds of minor scale, we don't change the key signature, we draw in an accidental, which is just an extra flat, sharp, or natural symbol. So for harmonic, we want B natural. We'd have to put the natural symbol on the B, and in melodic, we would put one on the A as well. A natural minor doesn't have any flats or sharps and it's all white notes. If we were to use melodic or harmonic minor, for example, we would have to add sharps to the 6th or the 7th notes. So if you get used to seeing those accidentals on the 6th and 7th notes in different keys, it's a clue to spot that you're going to be using the harmonic minor or whatever it is when you're reading music. I hope that was helpful. Let me know in the comments if you still have any lingering questions about minor scales. For me, when I start seeing, using and hearing these things in music, that's when the connection really sinks in between the theory side and the music itself. Subscribe for more content to help you develop your piano playing. Thanks for watching.